Patrick, welcome. Nice to see you. Here we are. We had to miss last week because of schedules and availability and access, but here we are another week, well, 2 weeks since we last talked about the Canucks. Let's get right into it. Last time we did one of these, I talked about how there was a lot of negativity while the Canucks were on that first road trip, and I didn't necessarily think that they'd been bad. Like they started the season with a 6-game road trip, and of course, they come home and they don't win and people are upset. And, they had a good comeback win, although I know like when they went down 2-0 against the Rangers, the pitchforks were being sharpened. But generally, we still say it's still early for a reason. The wins obviously matter, and sports reporters are full of cliches, and 2 points in October is the same as 2 points in April. Right. But your view, how is the team playing? Do you see a team that's in danger? Do you see a team that has potential? Do you see a team that needs to do something significant?
Well, is something significant mean fire the coach? Is that what you're?
Oh, it could be anything. I mean, we'll get into the Eichel trade later, but I look at what Vegas, of course, puts the chips in the middle of the table.
Right.
Typically, you get copycats. We'll talk about that later. I'm just saying, like, how do you? Results are one thing. It's a results-based business. But how has the team been as bad as some people have suggested they are?
Well, first of all, I don't think firing the coach is the way to go right now. I don't think that solves anything. And this is to say, essentially, I'm still waiting for the team to show sort of a bit more of an identity, because we think of how they played 2 years ago. They were kind of up-tempo, exciting. They were a fun team to watch. They gave away a lot, obviously, defensively. And part of that was personnel. Part of that was maybe the way they were playing, the kind of breakouts they were trying. Whereas this year, it's, at least the talk has been much more kind of a grinding kind of lunch bucket kind of, bring your lunch bucket to work kind of mentality. And they've been better defensively, but they've also been pretty stagnant on offense. And some of that, I think, has just been straight up struggles for like Elias Pettersson. Like, we all see it with our eyes. He hasn't been that good. He's been better the last couple of games. There is a bit of a dam perhaps going to burst there. I mean, one of the things was even if he wasn't playing that well, he wasn't even getting any bounces. And he talked about that himself when we talked. I asked him last week, like, do you need it? He goes, yeah, well, look at my first goal, the only goal he scored, which was the puck that went off the end boards, hit Carter Hart in the foot and bounced in the net, right? Like that was the furthest thing from vintage Pettersson. But that chance he had on Tuesday on the 2-on-1 with JT Miller, where Shesterkin got a little piece of it and put it off the crossbar. Pettersson was shooting for the top of the net, and if he gets it a little bit higher, he hits the top of the net. And that was a vintage moment. I mean, obviously he didn't score, but it was an opportunity that he should be getting lots of. And so from that standpoint, like, I don't think they're going to turn into world beaters all of a sudden. And, you do look at the best teams. We saw the Edmonton Oilers last weekend. And, I'm still sort of cautious with the Oilers given where things have gone for the past decade. But slowly but surely, they're a team that, partly because Connor McDavid is playing the best hockey we've maybe ever seen from any player ever. But as a general rule, the Oilers are playing well. They're one of the better teams in the division. Vegas is one of the better teams in the division. I just don't see the Canucks getting quite to that level. They're partly just because their defense isn't that deep. They've got Quinn Hughes, who's obviously playing well. Ekman Larsson's playing well. Whoever he's being partnered with has generally been playing well. But they haven't also really played, other than the Oilers, haven't really played any tough teams yet. And to me, that's where we can't really judge who these guys are yet until they actually play some good teams. And, that's still not going to happen. They'll play Vegas next week. Maybe that'll be the first test where we actually see that.
So it's funny you bring up Pettersson. There's, again, I talk about, like, do you care about, is the team playing well, or is there too much negative noise, whatever it is. There's so many different points of view to come at this from. There will be a school of thought that says, don't worry about Elias Pettersson. He's an elite player. He's going to be fine. We know what he can do. But at the same time, the team is desperate for goals, and that's his main skill set. If Elias Pettersson isn't scoring, then who is? That's why they lost those games to start off at home So which camp are you in? Should people be worried about Elias Pettersson, or is this going to come?
I think it's
Are results going to come?
Yeah, I think it's going to come. I think he's he is a creature of habit, and that was an issue last year in his season starting. He just didn't have the same routine. Um, I think last year he's never talked about it, but other players have talked. I mean, Quinn Hughes was quite clear about it at the beginning of the season. He literally, he was honest last year from a mental health standpoint. Last year sucked. Not just the losing, but just the lack of sort of ability to do stuff and just kind of.
But every team's in that boat.
Yeah, no, but I'm just saying different teams were able to handle it in different ways. And some part of the problem was the Canucks just didn't win. And so it all compounded on it. And you just never got out of a rut. Like that just happens. And they weren't good enough last year. That was the other problem. But I think, the sort of weight of last season was a lot to deal with. And then he doesn't have his normal off season because he's recuperating from an injury. Obviously was able to work out in terms of skating, all that kind of stuff. But, he said the plan wasn't really to shoot stuff until August. And thankfully it surprised him and he felt a lot better. Like he felt better than he expected to be, but then he has his contract holdout, doesn't get a normal preseason. So he's been sort of building from behind. And he's never had to do that before. And also, this is, he had scoring struggles last year. He did eventually find a way a little bit before he got hurt. He's not a guy that's had a lot of experience with sort of down moments. And, it was interesting when we talked to him last Friday. He first of all owned it and said, I need to be better. But also just acknowledged that he had essentially let himself get into his own head and wasn't bursting into holes that he normally would be bursting into. That just there was a lack of confidence there, which, again, like he's a guy that's not been something that I think has been in his life in the past because he's always been, the top guy on his team, and now he's a player that other teams are planning to figure out ways to stop. And it is, again, another big challenge in the course of his career, but, he's so talented. I mean, that's the thing. We always forget, like there was that back check to help create Miller's breakaway on Tuesday night. He does do all the cliched little things. And when he's doing the little things, everything kind of flows from there. So no, I think I think he's going to be fine. I think he's finding his way. I mean, he needs to bag a goal, obviously, because, that does everything for your confidence. I think it's coming.
Yeah. So you talked about coaching, which is an interesting point. We know this organization isn't fond of paying people to do nothing, and they did have to, buy out a player that maybe they didn't want to, but realized they had to in the offseason. They just signed the coach to an extension. There are people calling for the coach's head. Do you think the coaching they just had a comeback win, so I don't want to be overly negative, but let's say this trend continues, far more losses than wins. Is the coach in trouble, and or what's your assessment of how the coach is doing? And I know special teams is a big part of that. It's one area where, the coach does have a significant influence on what happens out there, and it's been a magnificent source of frustration for Canuck fans.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, the sort of special teams just haven't been good enough. The power play hasn't been good enough. It should be better. The talent's there. The penalty kill hasn't been good enough. You need to figure that out. Essentially, last year in the end was a write-off for the whole organization. We know how much they battened down the hatches financially. There was next to nobody working in sort of business operations. And then, the budget was massively cut back on in the regular season in terms of real dollars. They may have been a cap team, but in terms of real dollars, they were way below what they'd been in the past. And realistically, they also knew budget-wise, like they were able to retain at least they were able to retain a lot of their season ticket holders, last season, but they took all their money and all that money's already in the bank, so they had to sort of budget. There was that sort of thinking, how do we budget? How do we do this? So last year in the end, they made some bets and some gambles. Maybe this will work out, but I think there was an understanding that a lot of them were going to be low probability bets. And so essentially they said, Travis, here's another chance. Here's a chance to have a real season. They built a better roster. Yeah, so if you're not winning games, and in the end, we saw it literally, we saw it last Saturday. They didn't score any goals at 5-on-5, but they also didn't give up any goals at 5-on-5. But Edmonton was 2 for 2. I mean, Oilers are having an all-time run on the power play, but then that was the difference, right? So, and that is all about the coaching, and if they aren't able to really truly find their way going forward, and like I said, you need more from the likes of Elias Pettersson, because quite simply they just haven't been creating enough opportunities to score, let alone scoring. Period. They just haven't been doing that enough, and even at home. And then that, in the end, is about how the way you want your team to play and how you're deploying your players and what combinations you're using. And that is the one difference a coach can make. In the end, he can't make the players themselves once they're on the ice. He can't control them, but he can certainly control how, who's with who and whatnot. Yeah, you could. Of course, there's going to be questions if they aren't really able to get themselves back on a run here. But my impression is that we're nowhere near that kind of a situation yet, and a lot more is going to have to sort of go sour before there's any kind of discussion on that. Even if the fans, I know there are fans out there that are feeling frustrated and they want to see something different, but I think there's still time to wait to see how things play out here, and certainly that's the impression I think is happening from management and ownership.
Trades are always fun. What ifs are always fun. It was a big offseason for GM Jim Benning. You talked about Vegas. I mean, no cliched puns involved, but they really did roll the dice on this one. They get on the surface an elite player. They gave up some immediate pieces that impact their team on the ice and have made them a Western Conference favorite for a long time. We don't know how this surgery is going to pan out. I mean, anytime you're dealing with a neck, you're dealing with a spine, yep. They could end up being fleeced in this, but it's a big move. It's a bold move. Do you see the Canucks at any point this season? I'm not talking about right now because there's lots of time to work through. Do you see them chasing this at all? Like, is this now like you have to answer in the Pacific? They've made it very, very clear, playoffs or bust. You talk about how elite Edmonton is. Calgary, apparently, we're in on the Eichel conversations, if you believe the rumors. I guess I'm just asking you, do you see between now and the trade deadline, which is a long way, and we have to see how the team focuses, do you think there are irons in the fire? Do you think there are chips to be played?
I mean, I think with this team, there always are. They're always interested in things. I mean, that's it. That was to quote our late friend Jason Botchford, there was this notion of Trader Jim. He just loves making trades. And I've always kind of argued that for better or worse, Jim Benning, just likes making hockey lineups. It's like that, when you were a kid and you say, I'll put this guy on my team and this guy on my team and you that. And I think there's a bit of that in Jim as well. I don't know if there's another one in the offing. I mean, that the Ekman-Larsson trade was the kind of deal that they've been wanting to make for a while. So far, so good, because him and Garland have been good quality players for this team. But that said, it was a pushing your chips in move, in that you're moving a first round pick again, right? I mean, you're they don't have a whole lot in the pipeline. That's the thing we have to remember. For all this downtime and struggles and talking about drafting and developing, we're back to a very thin pipeline.
Yeah, 4 years from now, when Myers is older, and I know they feel that they have more money to go out and acquire pieces, but you're not going to have that next generation. Like, losing your first round pick 2 years in a row is not a good scenario.
No, exactly. And I mean, you got maybe Jet Wu pans out. Like, you're hopeful that he works out, and Jack Rathbone is getting you needed a little more time maybe in the AHL, and I think that's fine. You still hope that Jack Rathbone becomes a second pairing defenseman, that he's going to be the guy behind Quinn Hughes. But there's not like a long list of guys like that. Like, you look at, say, like LA. I mean, that is the case in LA. There's just a long list of guys that are either in the lineup or hopeful to come into the lineup, and it didn't take them very long to make all that work. So yeah, I mean, this was a year where, you're right. I mean, they pushed their chips in. They've added a couple guys, and it's hard to imagine them doing. I mean, they could have been in for an Eichel move. You look at what was moved, what Vegas had to get rid of, and they obviously moved a couple players that were quite good. But it wasn't like they moved. There wasn't like they traded an Elias Pettersson or Quinn Hughes going the other way. Eichel would have looked really good on this team, and you sort of look at, okay, some of the names, you probably would have had to trade like Brockbesser or something, someone of that ilk, to get a player back like that.
Did you forget there was a salary cap?
Yeah, I know. Well, that's the thing. Like in the end, that's the other thing is like, how are you going to do all this with the salary cap? I mean, Vegas are dealing with that question too. They'll figure it out and they'll make it work.
I would suggest Vegas has more flexibility than Vancouver, but
well, I mean, what was it? Somebody put it up right now, like, in an $81 million cap world, the Vegas have like 11 players. They have like $76 million allotted to 11 players, which, is exactly the sort of, okay, well, you make it work in the playoffs kind of roster. I mean, it's a Tampa Bay kind of situation. No, exactly. Like, that said, again, I mean, I think the Canucks were probably in better chance of trying to make something like this work than they maybe would have been if they'd been trying to chase after Steve Stamkos last year when he was available. When there were other trades on the table, there were other players like Taylor Hall 2 years ago when he. The Canucks should have been interested in Taylor Hall. Like I said that 2 years ago. They should have been in on that, but they were in no way in a position to do that because of where they were with their cap situation. And again, I mean, that is a factor here, of course. Weirdly, I don't think as big a factor now as it was then because they actually have less dead weight in their cap structure. But still, you have to sort of sit back and think about the value. Now, it is fair to say, are you going to get, in terms of the increased cap challenge that Vegas has, is there actually a marginal advantage for them adding Jack Eichel? And I would say, yeah, in the end, efficiency wise, it doesn't make sense, but he is going to make your team better. And he is a true elite number one center, in the conversation. He's not Connor McDavid because no one is Connor McDavid right now. But, he to even be in that conversation, if you can ask the question, which you can, say, how close is he to Connor McDavid? That tells you everything you need to know in terms of if you're Vegas, you want to add this guy and you figure out how to get in the lineup. And in the end, that stands for the Canucks as well. If you're really serious about this being not just a playoff team, but a contender, you need to keep finding ways to get guys like this in the lineup. And, it is going to be a challenge for the Canucks to do that, but they should be looking at it. Okay,
real quick, because I know we've gone a little bit long here, but there is a lot of negativity online, in particular, in all walks of life, and analysis and discourse isn't immune from that. But it was fun to see a lot of people's reaction from the third period the other night. I know you've covered a lot of games behind a laptop. You've Zoom access with players. You were in the press box for that. We got Diwali night coming up. I'm sure there was an initial rush, but a weird feeling to get fans at full capacity back in the building. How much fun was it the other night? And does this feel more like normalcy for you going forward? The people can just forget all this bullshit for, a couple hours while they're in there cheering on their team?
Well, one of the things when we're sitting in the press box there is you look across and you can see where we were sitting last year, when we were in the Encore suite, which was a large suite area to keep us socially distanced. And, it was cold and quiet. And it just, we're getting back to where we want to be. Obviously, there's still, sort of a winter to get through, I guess. Fingers crossed. But yeah, it's just better. It's not just about the fact that, like I said, the team is essentially better than it was last year because it was hard to be. It would be hard not to be better than last year. But it's everything you just said. That sort of, there were a lot of emotions at the tail end of the second period there, obviously, because the team hadn't scored, and they had at that point 3 goals in 3 games or 4 goals in 3 games or whatever it was, and that sucks. Like, nobody wants to watch that. People want to be entertained. They're paying good money. Even if it is a Tuesday night, the rules in comedy don't apply to hockey. People are paying full price and they want to get a full experience. So, to have that comeback and the energy and the players feeding off of it, and just, everything about it, it's better. It's so much better. It's better just to sit back and feel like a human again, and not sort of stuck in this vortex of faceless life that we were last year. Even if we did get to go watch live hockey, like, that was a nice release. even if it was just going to work and not really, you talk to each other at the intermissions, but we were all there to work and we were all there to get out. And this is just a little bit more, there's that routine going to the rink. Like I park and I take the SkyTrain and I take the last, I take the SkyTrain the last couple stops just to get down to the rink. And just the fans wearing jerseys and riding the train and walking the streets and just that part of life. And it's a good release, and it feels somewhat normal again.
I would counter that the rules of comedy do apply to the Vancouver Canucks and the Vancouver Canucks, but that's just me. Patrick, we will leave it there. We've rabbited on a lot. Read Patrick's Canucks this week, just freshly posted Thursday, what day we're recording this.
Wednesday, we'll remember.
Yeah, no, it's okay. That's fine. There's certain demands on us these days. So that plus, all your game preview coverage all the way through the weekend, we got you covered on Canucks. Patrick, thanks for your work. Go to the VancouverProvince.com. The VancouverSun.com, and you can sign up for our Canucks Report newsletter there.